welcome back to part two of John O'Malley. Just like Junior G, there's so much to talk about that you can't do it in one take, right? We almost got him through high school in that first one. Well, I'll tell you what, you were a lot easier to get through high school than Junior G was. I'll tell you that much. But we struggled there getting him through high school, but he did all right. Junior, I'm kidding. But all right, we're still in high school because we really even haven't talked about, we talked about the turbulent times, right, that you grew up in the 60s with the assassinations, with the protests, with the war. Well, we had our own little drama, of course, in your senior year, I think it would have been, right? And that would have been the fires at Lagodi St. John's and then Lagodi High School. Now, you lived at the time, did you not, almost directly behind St. John's School, a little bit perpendicular, I guess, right across the railroad tracks. Mm-hmm. So that evening or morning, maybe what it was, tell me your recollection of, when you're right there, tell me your memories of finding out, looking out, and thoughts about the fire as it occurred at St. John's High School.
Well, I knew it was going to result in a consolidation. That's the first thing that crossed my mind.
First thing you thought of?
Yeah, I mean, I just realized.
Let me ask. So you were been at what point? Was that the fall? Where were we when that fire occurred? Of season. I'm just trying to picture.
I'm not sure.
Just trying to picture how far along you were in your senior year.
Mm-hmm. It must have been in the fall, but I really don't remember exactly. It's kind of a blur. I'm sorry, I just don't remember.
Yeah.
But what struck me was that you had two schools that were pretty good.
Yeah, really good.
Of course, Lagodi had already been fantastic. Jack Butcher's the best coach ever in Indiana as far as the longevity of his success there.
He's the best coach, period. Might be biased, but I don't think so.
Yeah. But I just realized. I mean, it's amazing how I thought, they're going to consolidate here, and you just, I don't know, just like your mind wanders. Like, we had a great team, we were undefeated. Lagodi had some great players. Look how much better we could have been. Mm-hmm. I would have liked it if I would have loved to keep playing for Junior G if it happened, but it's kind of just think about what might happen. Mm-hmm. But I'll be honest with you, I was really kind of focused on, now we got a season, we're in school. At that point, I knew I was going to West Point, so I was thinking about my future. What I'm saying? So I was kind of focused then.
So I'm trying to do my own time lapse here. So when the fire occurred, and you guys as senior students then went over to Lagodi High School, correct, to continue your senior year?
Well, see, that's where again, I don't want to misspeak here, but we were already going. Several of us were already going there. I don't think the high school didn't. The high school didn't burn down. It was the grade school.
That's true.
So there were several of us who were going to Lagodi for sciences and mathematics. We were already doing that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm just trying to be real clear. There wasn't a radical change at that moment because it was already established, and the St. John's High School was still in place. So we took some of our classes there. Mm-hmm. Then several of us went to Lagodi High School, but we've been doing that the whole last couple of years.
Right.
And I had a great affection for Lagodi because they treated me well, and I enjoyed band, and I enjoyed physics and science. So I really felt connected there also.
Yeah, and you see, and I tell this on occasion, but I was in second grade, and the first thing I thought of when the fire was, I'm not going to be a Lagodi Lion. I didn't like the Lagodi Lions. I mean, I'm not going to carry one of those Lagodi Lion gym bags. You remember those? And I'll be darned if it wasn't the greatest season Lagodi ever had.
Exactly,
basically back in 1970 or close to it. But as sad as it was kind of a natural transition for you, though. Yeah. So it didn't really impact you.
It really didn't. It really didn't. I mean, I couldn't have had a better high school experience. I loved everything about it. Mm-hmm. And athletics are great, academics are great, music. I had a wonderful experience. Mm-hmm. And so nothing would blemish that for me. As far as did I feel like it was going to disrupt my life? It didn't, because I was moving on. To West Point.
Okay. So Joy, turn away a little bit because we're going to talk about you again. So now it's your senior year, and you're kind of transitioned over to Lagodi basically. I know Joy's younger, but tell me a little bit about lack of a better term, though, the romance obviously blossoms at some point. When did John O'Malley and Joy Wagner become John O'Malley and Joy Wagner together?
Well, we started dating, a little bit when she was a freshman, but again, that's a little awkward
Right.
age. But we were close. We talked. We were in band every day,
Good
and I
friends.
was very much enamored with her. But we really didn't start getting connected. When I went to West Point, we stayed in touch, and she dated off and on. Like I said, a lot of people were interested in her for obvious reasons. But when I'd come home, we'd get closer, and then I'd go and I'd come back, we'd get closer. So we kept getting, closer and closer. And then when she was a junior, I think she invited me to her prom when I was at West Point, so I came home for that. And then she came to my graduation. And then, we'll come back to this, but after I graduated from West Point, I was stationed for a while at Fort Knox in Kentucky. And she was getting a nursing degree in Bloomington. That's when we started getting really close, spending a lot of time together. And then I had selected my first assignment was in Korea. I had volunteered to go to Korea for a year in my first assignment. So before I went to Korea, I asked her to marry me.
Okay.
Yeah, so, this would have been, we got married in 75, so this would have been in 74. So before I went there, but we were dating, seriously. And I think what I did was, and she'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I put a ring inside about 6 I had this great big box.
Oh, you're one of those guys.
Yeah, weird thing. And she got down to the ring, so it was all good.
Yeah.
But I kind of always felt, I never found anyone that compared to her. I mean, not only was she just really beautiful, but she was so sweet, and she became a Catholic on her own. It had nothing to do with me, but she was just very focused on her faith.
Yeah, because she went to Lagodi High School, graduated Lagodi.
Yeah, well, she was she was the head of the Lionettes.
Yeah.
She was extremely talented and prom queen.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
She was really something.
I told John, and Joy, I'll tell you this too. John didn't already. But, so I'm in the hospital down in Washington, and 12 years old, I think. Have a beautiful nurse.
She was actually at 8 at the time, but she was there.
She was treating me for something, and I like it when she was on shift, and I didn't know that for sure that it was her, but here, I don't know, 50 years later, I confirmed with John about 2 weeks ago that was her. And, yeah, I had a little crush on the lady you've called your wife for 48 years, but you know what? A lot of people did, John.
Well, they did.
She was a beautiful lady.
But you know what's amazing about her? She said, John, Sam pretty wants to move on, but she just was so sweet. I mean, she was a wonderful, compassionate nurse. She was a nurse for 45 years.
45 years.
She worked at hospitals at Washington and California, and then she worked with geriatrics. She worked with retired nuns. They all just loved her. I mean, she was just really a wonderful nurse. But she's the only person. And I dated off and on, but as a lot of us do, but we talked about God, we talked about children, there was so much depth to her. Her mother raised her just so brilliantly on her own, but she just had her act together. You know what I'm saying? She just really was a good person. And I just never got over her.
Yeah. Did you get married in St. John's Catholic Church?
Yeah, we got married at St. John's. I had a military wedding with sabers, and it was really wonderful time.
Who officiated?
What's that?
Who officiated the wedding?
I can't remember his name. Isn't that terrible? I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's not important. It's just I'm thinking back to those days, and I'm just trying to think again. That would have been, like you said, maybe 74. Was it?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I can't. I should know. I just can't put my finger on his name. So let's talk a little bit about, because I'm interested. You're interested in going to West Point. Obviously, there's certain criteria you'd have to meet academically, leadership for West Point. But help me understand the priority of basketball, where that fit in. Yeah.
Was that the first priority?
Let me tell you, there's an interesting story there that I really, again, feel very blessed. I had never even thought about West Point. We don't have anybody. My dad was in the military, but no one we ever knew was at West Point. Well, Coach Knight contacts me and said, would you ever be interested in considering going to West Point and play basketball? That's the first time I ever crossed my mind. So he came to watch me play one time, and we were playing Otwell. And Otwell had probably one of the best guards in Southern Indiana, Steve Barrett.
Sure.
He was phenomenal, and he brought the best out of me. Probably one of my best games because he was just so motivating to me. But Knight saw that game, And so that's when I first started seriously thinking about it, because I just had never considered it, because he knew about my grades. The way it works is that a senator or congressman has the option to recommend 5 people at any one time to enter the academy. So I had, I had to work for it, but I had to apply, and one of the senators recommended me for West Point, and I had gotten to the point of approval. However, I was rejected because my eyes were too bad.
Really?
Bob Knight stepped in and had that reversed, because I got a letter saying, your eyes aren't acceptable. I'm sorry, we can't accept you. And about a month later, they rescinded that letter because Knight had intervened and pulled some strings. So I wouldn't have gotten into West Point had it not been for Bob Knight.
So he was at St. John's High School for a
He
ball game?
came to watch the game. Yeah, he came.
So nobody had heard of Bob Knight at that point.
But
right?
nobody would have known who he was.
Yeah. Had you heard of him at all before he contacted you?
No. And I started studying him. He had a great military coaching career. He was NIT several times, led the nation in defense. He was a great young coach. But I didn't know anything about it. I just but I will tell you how that all came about. I had the option to go to a few colleges on a scholarship, smaller colleges, and I appreciated that. But I kind of reasoned I wasn't good enough at NBA, so I knew that wasn't going to happen. But I love basketball. But I thought, if I break my leg at West Point, I'm going to have something to show for it. If I break my leg at, XYU College, it kind of comes, I'm not trying to be negative, but that was part of what went through my mind. Yeah. Does that make any sense?
It does. But didn't it also go through your mind or your parents' mind, and particularly maybe your mom's mind, that again, here we are in the turbulence, of the Vietnam War, and here you are. You want to play basketball really bad, and you're accepted to West Point, but that means the Army.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because the class of 1972, the class before me that graduated,
at West
was
Point.
the last class. West Point was the last class to go to Vietnam. We missed it by 1 year.
I got you. Okay.
And it's funny, at the time I thought, I wish I'd been there, but in reflection, it was probably again a blessing, because war is just so devastating to so many people. A lot of the not classmates, but people I knew in this class of 72 who went, have some pretty terrible stories to talk about. So the point is, I guess I never really considered, when you're young, sometimes I guess you don't really get, a full understanding of what's the worst that could happen.
Yeah.
My mom talked to me about that, but she said, if you're willing to go, we'll support you. But I said, well, it's like I said, it looks like a great place to be. I can play a little basketball maybe, but I think it'll be a good opportunity for me.
Yeah. West Point being in New York.
Yep.
Had you ever been away from home?
No.
Never been away from home?
Not other than
the region.
Tri-state area,
So probably never flew.
That was the first flight I did. Knight flew me out to West Point here, so that was the first time.
Yeah. So did Coach Knight come into your living room and talk to your parents, or was it?
He came home and he was there about 3 or 4 hours. And what was so interesting about it, that's why I was telling you earlier about the connection he made. My dad couldn't stop talking. He was real excited about the whole thing.
Very quiet. Yeah.
He was talking a lot. Like I told Mom, I've never heard Dad say that many words. Because he was excited about. He evidently had studied and had an idea of what this might mean. And he had a military background, so he was pretty excited about it. That's one of the reasons. I think Knight was impressed with him because they were so supportive. They realized they had given me such a good life. And, he saw me had a good game. And like I said, probably one of the best games I had, because I was playing against Steve Barrett. So it worked out good where he was excited. But so I think the situation was, it just all kind of came together. You know what I'm saying? It's like this.
Well, would you have considered West Point had you not played basketball?
No,
you were going to play basketball.
Yeah, I never thought about West Point until that option came up. I wanted to play basketball, but when it came down to I had the option to go, but I could go other places. Like you said, and my mom and dad helped me there. They were very honest with me. They said, John, you have certain skills and you've had success, but you're probably not going to play. And I said, I know I'm not good enough to play in the NBA. So that wasn't an issue. I wanted to play, and I loved the game. I just loved it.
Did you go to West Point with your eyes wide open in regards to, first of all, Coach Knight, but aside from that, an environment of discipline? I'm sure you were yelled at on more than one occasion with your instructors and officers and such, but did you know what you were getting into? I
had no idea, and it was the biggest shock. I mean, I want to say this so people can appreciate, because I don't want to make it sound worse than it is. But I come from a little school. I'm a valedictorian. I'm decent athlete, so I'm kind of popular. I get to West Point, I'm the scum of the earth, and it's like that was a hard adjustment for me. It's like people were screaming at you constantly and like calling you idiots, and the reason they do that, the wonderful thing about West Point is the whole concept is they want to train people that become leaders who can think and act and function under pressure. So they put so much pressure on you all the time so you can function. I didn't function very well initially because I wasn't used to being yelled at and being considered dumb, But I got used to it. I realized finally the first 3 months are called beast barracks. So the freshmen come in, they're called plebes, and they run you through the ringer. It's kind of like base camp or boot camp, but it's worse. I mean, a lot of physical activity. Up at 4, everything has to be spit shine, spotless. It's just nonstop. And we lost. I had 1,200 people go in my class. We lost about 200 in plebes. Some they just didn't want to put up with it. But West Point has about an 80% completion rate, so we ended up graduating about 900. But that first month, the first couple months are really brutal, and especially for someone like me, where it was such a shock because here I think I'm something, but then I get there and I find out there are people a whole lot smarter and a lot more talented, a lot more big schools. So it was a real shock for me. But my dad told me, again, great leadership in his prayer. He said, John, whatever you do, get through the first year, regardless of what it takes. So then if you don't like it, you gave it your first shot, and you can make the decision to go. So I really wanted to leave a few times because it was just so much pressure. First time away from home, I felt lonely. I was feeling sorry for myself. Why are these guys screaming at me all the time? Every time you were in the hallway, you had to be at attention in the barracks, and any upperclassman could stop you and make you recite hundreds of different things. You had to just be able to rip off, and if you couldn't do it, you got penalized. You had to eat at attention in the mess hall. I mean, it was, looking back on it, it was a really interesting experience, but there was a purpose there. I mean, when you look back on it, you understand why they were doing that. They didn't hate us. They wanted to make sure we were able to function under pressure because that was the objective.
Yeah, West Point. Never knew much about it. I did get an opportunity, but I'm sure it's such a demanding lifestyle for you, and then basketball on top of that.
Well, I will say this though, basketball was actually kind of even though night made it pretty difficult, and I'll talk more about that. That was kind of a oasis because during the season we could eat without being at attention as a freshman, and we did a little bit of traveling. We got to go to practice every day to get out of that environment, So you still had to do it. You had to keep your grades up. We went to class 6 days a week. You got graded in every class every day. The most I ever had in the class was 15 people, so you couldn't hide. You had to keep your work up.
Yeah.
But basketball was, kind of that oasis for me where I could get away once in a while.
I'm sorry. I did one of these with Don Fisher, the IU announcer here last week, I guess. And intentionally, I didn't talk about Bob Knight. It did come up one time. And it was an interesting story, too. But intentionally, I didn't because it was Don Fisher. I wasn't talking about Bob Knight. But I want to talk to you about Bob Knight. I know he wasn't Bob Knight considered, everybody knew him at that point. They didn't know him. But how did you find him as a coach? I mean, then you knew, did he have a reputation or did you go into it, hey, he was a nice guy in my kitchen. Now he's a different guy.
Well, I had no idea what I was getting into. I mean, he really caught me by surprise. I did know early on he cared because he talked to us a lot about, life, and he goes, he was just very honest. So from the beginning, I felt like he cared. But when we got into the season and we started going through drills and his real personality and coaching style came out, it was kind of shocking initially. He was probably one of the most brilliant coaches. I mean, Junior was my best coach. He motivated me. I would have done anything. We had the results there. We were undefeated. But Knight was absolutely a genius. I mean, here we had every team we played in college was bigger than us. They were more talented than us, and we were competitive in almost every game we were ever in because of him. You know what I'm saying? He analyzed their defense. I remember we were playing Fordham, and they were ranked 5th or 6th in the country, and they had a guard. I can't remember his name, but he was the whole week. All I did was play defense against this guy, in practice. He said, John, whatever you do, don't let him go to his right, because once he goes to his right, he starts getting hot, blah, blah, blah. Well, we were holding our own, but the guy went to his right 3 times in a row and made a basket, and Knight just went berserk. He drags me off the court, goes with a few choice words, and he says, what did I tell you? And it's like, what I finally got to the point with him was, you had to kind of have an out of body experience. You know what I'm saying? Like when he's sitting there screaming at you, you realize he cared. You couldn't let it just crush you. You had to just kind of realize there was a purpose here. He cared, and all these words were just words. I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but he could destroy you if you're not careful.
Absolutely. I'm sure he did a few, right?
Yeah, he did.
A lot of transfers. Did you ever think about quitting, coming home?
Not after the first year. You know, the first year I did, but after I got into basketball and after I understood what West Point was about and what it meant to me, but you got to realize basketball was the focal point. But I got into glee clubs. I had a lot of enjoyment there.
Yeah.
I had some good friends, and I really responded to the challenge. It was very physical, and I liked that. The physicality of West Point. Everybody has to go through boxing. Everybody has to go through wrestling. You have to go through the obstacle course once every 3. I really enjoyed all that.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned the word plebe, because I saw it on a picture and it described John O'Malley as a player and averaged maybe 14.7 as a plebe. And I didn't know if they were calling you a name or what that was. But at West Point, a plebe was on the freshman team.
Yeah.
Was a freshman.
Yeah, that's just the they call a junior a cow for some reason. Just crazy. But I had so many good experiences there. I really did. And I want to tell you something about Knight. Knight brought the best out of me. I was his player because I was really aggressive and I listened to him. I wasn't the greatest offensive player there. There were so many people that were better than me, but he loved defense and I really was good at defense. I was quick and I was aggressive. He used to have a drill where he'd put the big guys on one side of the goal and the small guys the other. He'd roll the ball out and say, "Get it." And I lost a tooth in one of those drills. We had guys break fingers. Yeah. I mean, it was really brutal. The point of it was, it's like he really expected you to really give it everything you got, because he said, "John, guys, not just John, but everybody you play is going to probably be better than you. They're going to be bigger. They're going to be more talented. If you don't out hustle them and outthink them, you're not going to have a prayer." Yeah. And so that was his approach. In defense, we spent 75% of our time on defense and 25% on offense. And that's why we were at least competitive.
Yeah. You said you would run through a wall for junior G, but literally you almost had to for bottom line, right?
And I would for him as well. Yeah. We used to do, I told you I kind of felt motivated but we used to do a drill. We'd go up to Mikey Stadium, the football stadium, and we'd have to run the stadium until we dropped. We're talking 50, 60 times up and down. Mm-hmm. Practice was harder than any game we ever played with Knight. Right. The game was kind of a relief, because he worked us so hard and we were in such great condition. You had to be in pretty good condition at West Point, just because they had required that. But Knight took it to a whole other level as far as the discipline and the conditioning and the defense focus and the physicality and the aggressiveness. I mean, we were in, like I said, almost every game. We won a lot, but, we were competing with people who were much better than we were.
Any contact with Coach Knight after your dad's passing? I know you said at the funeral, yes, but any contact with him since then?
Yeah, but I want to just, before I get off that, if I could, I want to tell you a couple things that are great about West Point. That gave me a chance to play at Madison Square Garden 3 times.
Really?
That was exciting. That's a great place to play. Yeah. When I was a freshman plebe, I was, at that time, freshmen couldn't play on the varsity in college. Mm-hmm. But we went down to the NITs, and Pete Maravich played against Knight. Team, and we beat them. That was fun to watch.
Really?
Him. Yeah. He got 40 points, but nobody else scored, because his whole approach was let him go. We're not
so Coach Knight didn't worry about defending.
He didn't guard him. He just said, let him score, because we'll keep everybody else. That was his strategy. He was just, you couldn't stop Pete anyway, but he didn't let anybody else score. I mean, he just ratcheted it down. That's how smart he was in basketball. I was there was another thing that I had about Knight here. In my opinion, about 90% of what Knight did was for effect. He'd get excited, he'd scream and yell. I think sometimes it was kind of, a way to motivate, and certain people respond. Not everybody did.
Right.
But he lost at one time. We were playing Villanova, and they were ranked, and we were ahead like 3 or 4 points with like 30 seconds to go, and we lost. I think I threw it away. It was just a mental thing. He absolutely came unglued. He tore the door off the locker room. We drove home back to West Point. He kicked several windows out. He screamed all the way back. It's like, I mean, that was the only time I was kind of scared because he just kind of lost it.
Kicked windows out of
The bus.
the bus.
Yeah, on the way home. I mean, it
Yeah.
was really frightening
Yeah.
because he just lost it. And, that's the only time it was that extreme, but you probably heard things about him. That was one that, I wasn't anticipating.
Yeah.
But, at the end of that, just again, to check full circle,
Yeah.
when you come back at the end of that bus ride, he kind of talked to each one of us. He said, the reason I'm so upset is that I can't tolerate mental errors. And you've got to realize in life, you have to work harder and outthink. And it's like you can't control the physical, situation necessarily if they're bigger and stronger and faster, but you can control what you do and how you think and how you.
Mhm.
So his focus was we lost focus and we did mental errors, and he couldn't tolerate mental errors.
Yeah.
But he attributed that to say the reason that's so important is that you're going to have to do that in life too. I mean, I remember him saying to me point blank, says, John, you're not going to be an NBA player. I know you try hard, but you have to, because the fact that you're going to have a lot of competition in life, you've got to work hard and focus and stay mentally sharp because that's what it takes to be successful in whatever you're going to take. So again, it goes back to that compassion that he had. It wasn't just that we lost, but he was concerned about us. And a lot of players will have said things like that about him.
Yeah. Oh, they have. Yeah, absolutely.
You asked a question. I'll get back to your question here. After
your father's passed.
2 times in particular, and again, it's kind of funny. When he was coaching at West Point, he reached out to me in Cincinnati and said, I understand you've got a basketball player in your family. Would you like him to come to my basketball camp? I said, yeah, of course I would. So I hadn't seen Knight for a couple of years, several years actually, even though we had a little bit of correspondence. So when I got there, it's a long story, but when I hurt my back playing racquetball, I gained some weight. And I was over. He hadn't seen me. I was heavier than the last time he saw me. And the first thing he said to me, with a few choice words,
Yeah.
O'Malley, I can't believe you're so blanketed like fat. What happened? And I said, well, Coach, you're not exactly skinny. And he said, he said, well, nobody tells me I'm fat. I said, that's how they're all scared to death of you. So, but that's just the way he was.
But now I can say it. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
So that was kind of fun. He was very nice, and he let my son come for free. And I will say this, and I hope Coach isn't listening to this question, but somebody asked me if I would want my son to play for him. Mm-hmm. I would have to think about that because not everybody can tolerate that type of intensity. My son might have been able to, but we had some really good players left West Point and basketball players because they couldn't tolerate that.
Well, obviously at Indiana University that happened as well. And those kitchen conversations, I'm sure Coach Knight was pretty frank with them that I'm not blowing you any smoke. I'm going to, your kid's either going to make it with me or not.
Yeah.
And sometimes it is.
But like I said, we really, I could see why he would be so successful. Once he got the kind of talent he needed at IU, applying that brilliant strategy and defensive focus and, an offense that's totally focused on, how to take advantage of the talent you have. It made, I didn't know he was going to be that successful, but it didn't surprise me because we were successful with a lot less talent at West Point.
So he left. Did he leave West Point before you graduated?
Yes.
Went to Indiana in early 70s.
Yeah.
Mike Krzyzewski was there as well?
Mike Krzyzewski graduated when I arrived. But I met him, and I played basketball against him a couple times because he came back. He and I were, at that time, were very close. But he had already moved on into the military. But he came back, and, he wouldn't remember me necessarily. But he talked to us. I played against him. And, it was really good experience because I know he was really good at West Point before.
So he was an assistant coach?
Not when I was there.
Okay. The Glee Club. So obviously your talents lead you to the Glee Club at West Point as well. So much so that you have a solo in front of your group on the Mike Douglas show. And again, as I said in part 1, Mike Douglas was kind of the, I don't know, maybe not Oprah, maybe more Ellen, but talk show host, daytime talk show host. And I'm sure you guys, the Glee Club of West Point, traveled around the country. But how did that happen? And you actually had the solo on national television.
Well, there was between two of us. My best friend and I were in the Glee Club together. His name is Jeff Sorensen, and he had a beautiful voice. He ended up becoming a 4-star general, which was really interesting because he was kind of a goofball there. All the people you would have thought wouldn't have made it. He was brilliant in the military. But the point is, we actually flipped a coin. The director said, it's one of you two seniors can do this, but it's going to be between you to decide. We couldn't decide. Huh? So we flipped the coin and I won. So
that's it.
And what was interesting about that, I sang a solo to Karen Valentine, which you may or may not know. The song was A Real Live Girl.
Room 222 maybe? Well,
yeah. And that was really fun. I mean, it was, it was.
So let me, you sang it to her. She at the time she was a star?
Yeah, she was in a swing and I was swinging her, and it was like a real live girl was what I was singing here. So
okay.
The good job was singing in the background, and it was fun.
But she was already a star?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have video of that?
You do someplace, yeah. But
okay. All right.
It was fun.
Yeah.
But we also sang at Mount Rushmore. We sang at Amy Eisenhower's 75th birthday party. Uh-huh. So I had a really good experience with the Glee Club. And we had a lot of talented singers there. So. That was another thing that made West Point really enjoyable for me. There was no pressure there. That was kind of getting an oasis. We practiced, and we had some real good voices. And I could hold my own. I wasn't the best singer we had, but we were seniors, and it kind of came down. So there was several people that could have done it. Several could have done it better, but it turned out good. I was lucky again.
So what's the commitment to the military, John, at West Point? Kind of take me through what you were committed to.
Yeah, at that time, whenever you graduate, you have a 5-year. You have to stay in the Army for 5 years. That's the commitment.
So is that after college?
Yeah. So you graduate as a second lieutenant.
Okay.
After graduate, you spend 4 years at West Point. When you're at West Point, everything's paid for, but you get paid half of a second lieutenant's pay. So you're being paid to go, and they pay for everything at the same time. I don't know what the numbers are, but it was a pretty expensive investment here, for the government. But they expected the return being that they would hopefully have trained leaders who would be able to be helped. But we had to stay 5 years. That's the requirement. That's what you pay back.
Okay. And again, after 4 years at West Point. Right?
Yes.
So you said your first, I can't recall.
First assignment.
First assignment was in Korea.
Mm-hmm.
And that was your choice?
Yeah. Here's the other thing, just again, to put
because I would have picked Hawaii, or somewhere like that. But
Well, I wanted to travel and get out. What happens is, the other thing I realized is that there were a lot of smart people. I worked really hard at West Point, but I was in the middle of the class. As good as I could do, there was a lot of people a lot smarter than I was. But what happens is the first guy in the class picked his choice, and you work your way down. So by the time it got to me, there were, Hawaii was gone. But there were, I had really wanted to go to Korea. I just thought it'd be fun to get out of the country and be gone. So I picked Korea, and I really had a wonderful time. I want to tell you a little story about that. One of the funniest stories. And bear with me because it sounds like I'm just trying to impress you, but there's a good ending because it's really funny. My dad taught me how to play ping pong, and he put a little ply table, down in the basement, and he taught me, and I really enjoyed ping pong. I played it all through high school. I won the ping pong tournament at West Point. So then when I was in Korea, I won the ping pong tournament on the poles. I was at Camp Casey, Tongdishan, about an hour south of the DMZ. So I thought I was, pretty special. So I said, okay, I'm ready to go to the big time. So I entered a Korean ping pong tournament in Seoul, Korea after that. And there was a 9-year-old boy that beat me 21-1 and 21-2.
Yeah, bad days.
You had to be there, but the people loved that. It was all Korean.
Oh my God.
And this guy absolutely cremated me. And I thought I was so good, and this guy just made me look like I was. Yeah. It was really kind of funny because he was just barely up over the edge of the table. He had so much spin on the ball, I just couldn't get it back. And I realized what was happening, and I actually kind of, even though I was embarrassed a little bit, I thought this is probably good justice here because I thought I was much better than I was. Yeah. But he just kicked me, and all the people there were very polite, but they loved it.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's a tough day.
Yeah, it was good, but I had a really good experience there. I tried to learn the language. Nara Mikuk Saranunida means I'm an American soldier. We traveled the country. I never quite got used to kimchi, which is their main thing, which is like fermented vegetables. But some really good experiences. I got connected to a local orphanage right outside the post, and I spent quite a bit of time there, and I really enjoyed it. They really tragic lives, but I was just impressed with how resilient some of these kids were. But that kind of planted a seed because we ended up adopting a child from Korea later. But there was kind of a connection there because it occurred to me that I was adopted. If it ever happened that I might have that opportunity, I would be open to it if Joy was open to it. But I really enjoyed Korea. Just overall, it's a good experience. The one intense period was, I don't know if you remember this, but at one point the North Koreans were digging tunnels under the DMZ and trying to get into South Korea. So we were the first line of defense. So for 2 weeks we were on alert and full combat duty on the DMZ, thinking something might happen. That was the only time I was in a combat zone, but it was pretty intense. And I actually was kind of, we didn't sleep really for basically 2 weeks. So really we thought we were going to have a conflict right then. Yeah. That's the only time it was that, but it was it was an experience, and I enjoyed it.
Were you married at this point?
No, I was engaged to Joy when I was in Korea, but we communicated back and forth. The funniest thing that happened to me in Korea was I was in a tank, armored tanks. That was my division. The part of the army I went into. So we did a lot of live fire exercises. So when you're driving a tank as a tank commander, you control the gun tube. The tube in front of the tank. You have to move it up and down. So when you go over a hill and go down, pointing down, you're supposed to raise the tube. Well, I was in a big hurry, and I was a platoon leader. So we were doing a live fire exercise, and I went over a hill, and the tank kind of jolted, but I didn't think about it. So we pulled up, and we fired a live round a few down in the road, but it kind of made a funny noise. And when I looked out, I had actually packed the gun tube with mud, and when I fired, it peeled back the gun tube like a banana. But what was really embarrassing is that the battalion commander in Korea gave me the loose tube award because I was the first one that ever ruined a tank by not getting it out. So I was ribbed by that one for quite a while.
Yeah, well, Coach Knight would have gave you a lot more than that.
Yeah, he would have.
So you go through 5 years. Come back home? What's home? I don't even know at this point.
Well, the other thing, I also took Taekwondo. I got to a brown belt.
Don't tell me against a 9-year-old.
No. I should have. He would have beat me in that too, probably. But I also enjoyed that because that was something that was really important. So anyway, the other thing I did, again, as far as the military, that I really enjoyed was that and I'm backing up just a little bit, but I went to in Fort Knox. We studied about being armored tank commanders, but I also went to Ranger School. And Ranger School was really interesting because it's pretty challenging. The two elite schools, one is SEAL training. Have you heard of SEAL training?
I've heard of it, sure.
Yeah. Well, about 25% of people graduate. That's the toughest one.
Right.
Rangers, about 40% graduate, but it was 16 weeks. It was still pretty grueling. You do mountain training where you rappel down 500-foot cliffs. You're out in the Everglades, doing maneuvers. But I was pretty skinny. I was probably about 180 pounds at that point, but I lost 25 pounds during that time because it's really intense. Yeah. But I really enjoyed it because it was a sense of accomplishment. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's like the reason you go through that is to prepare you for war. Fortunately, I did never have to use it in a combat situation. But, the fact that you have the chance to make it through that, it gives you that added confidence. Yeah. And I felt good about that experience. I did it with my friend who we flipped a coin. Jeff Sorensen went through Ranger School with me, and we were just really close. But that was a good experience too. Yeah. So get back to your question. I left Korea, came home, and got married to Joy.
Home was Lagodi.
Okay. And then my next assignment was Fort Riley, Kansas.
Okay.
So we were at Fort Riley. We were there for 3 years. We had our first son there, John.
Okay.
The military post. I had a great experience. I was promoted to first lieutenant and captain when I was at Fort Riley, and Joy loved it. She loved the military, balls, and it was just a good life. They took good care of us, and I enjoyed that experience a lot, and she did too. But two things that were kind of fun is that At this point, I was the company commander, and the company commander has like about 30 tanks and maybe 150 men, so it's a pretty big group. So we were doing maneuvers in Kansas. And of course, as you know, Kansas has tornadoes once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we were on maneuvers, and there was a tornado coming, so we got called back in. So I had my executive, first lieutenant, say, I want you to take the troops back in. So they all went back in. So my tank, the 4-man crew I had, I always wanted to drive through a tornado with my tank. So we did that. So your tank weighs about 50 tons.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought there's no way it's going to be lifted. So we drove through the middle of this tornado. And the tank was rocking quite a bit, but it didn't lift off. But it was just real exciting. So I was hoping I could get away with it. But when I got back, the colonel called me into his office and said, did you really drive that tank through that? And he goes, I should write you up. That was just totally irresponsible. And he really gave me a hard time. And then right before I left, he goes, what was it really like? He said, I always wanted to do that.
Yeah. Again, Bob Knight would not have. Now that to me,
it was exciting.
The difference between you and I is I wouldn't drive through a tornado.
Well, you got to realize how big a tank is.
Well, hey, you realize how strong a tornado might be, but you came out of it fine.
It was just fine.
Yeah. Did you actually go through it?
We drove right through the middle of it. We were in the eye, everything stopped, and we drove through it. The tank was really rocking, but it didn't lift it off the ground, and it was fine. But it was real exciting.
So you were with somebody else who had the same.
Well, the tank has a 4-man crew, so we were 4 of us in the tank. I was the tank commander. We had a driver, a gunner, and then the machine gunner. So there were 4. I voted. I said, I'm going to give you a chance. If we all vote unanimously to do this, we'll do it. If one person doesn't want, we won't. So they all said, oh, yeah, we're going to do this.
Okay. All right. Okay. Very good. All right. So you're married. You're Fort Riley, Kansas. What's next?
So
you have a son.
Well, I have a son, and that was important because he was 2 months old at the time, and I went on a 6-month deployment. Mm-hmm. When I came back, it was such a radical change. 2 to 8 months, 6 months. I was shocked, and it was so shocking. I said, I don't ever want to miss that. So this is now to my 6th year, past my 5-year obligation. Mm-hmm. So I started thinking about maybe I need to get out because I was really upset that I missed so much.
Up to that point, you were thinking career?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I was definitely thinking that. But that's the first thing that started making me think, I wonder if that's the right decision, because it was shocking to miss that much of his life. So at the same time, several of my classmates had just been hired by Procter & Gamble. Procter & Gamble hired about 150 of my classmates in their 6th year, to go to work for Procter & Gamble. So one of my best friends got me an interview with them, just kind of in a, by chance, and it went really well. So they offered me a job, and I took it. So P&G at the time owned the Folger coffee plant in San Francisco. So they don't anymore. But so they hired me as a packing department manager in the Folger coffee plant in South San Francisco in California. Oh. So we left Fort Riley and drove to California and had probably some of the best times we've ever had in California. It was just a wonderful experience. I enjoyed the job tremendously, but we covered every inch of California. I mean, San Francisco, Yosemite, the Hearst Castle, Lake Tahoe, Highway 1, if you're familiar with any of that.
Just took advantage.
We had this old junker Volkswagen van, and Joy had flowers on it, kind of like a hippie. I had short hair, but she was, she might have looked like a hippie, but we drove everywhere, and we had so much fun. We took John, our little son, and we just took full advantage of that. Yeah. And so that was exciting. But we also, Joy and I we had a wonderful relationship, but we fought once in a while. We were having a fight in Pizza Hut, literally. And this couple came up and said,
"Who hasn't?
Would you ever be interested in being involved in Marriage Encounter?" Marriage Encounter is a Catholic organization for folks on the marriage.
So they're just overhearing you.
They heard us yelling at each other.
And somebody comes up to you.
Yeah, just out of the blue. And so we said, "No, we never. What is it?" So anyway, make a long story short, that night we went back to our house. Wasn't that strange? They would ask us that. Yeah. Well, we kind of continued the argument. We were still having the argument. So the only downside to California is that we were in a couple earthquakes. They were pretty minor, but we were still arguing. And we had a minor earthquake, but one of the counter earthquakes is like a roll. And when we had that roll in our house, we both kind of fell to the ground, and we thought, we need to stop arguing and join Marriage Encounter. So
there's a sign.
Yeah, it was a sign.
Yeah.
So we joined Marriage Encounter. The couple that asked us ended up being our friends today, some of our best friends. And we also, after we went to one, we became a couple where we present to other couples.
Oh.
Which was really a good experience because you had to talk about the good and the bad, and the difficulties, and how you struggled. We also met our best friend, who was the priest, who was the Portuguese priest who was involved. He was also there, and we got really close to him. So California was just a total positive experience all around the board here.
Well, think about that. I mean, an earthquake, it wouldn't have meant, if you didn't have it, that you wouldn't be married today. You probably would have a great relationship. But all the things that happened just because of that earthquake throughout your life that ended up being positive, not only for you, but for other people as well.
Well, I think so. I mean, I'm a big believer that God has a purpose, and a lot of things, in our life, we felt we were very blessed. And that was one of those God winks, or whatever you're going to call it, that said, maybe you should consider this. We were on about 10 or 15 marriage weekends where we would present, and we went to some of those beautiful, campuses and retreat centers. It was just a really good experience. I mean, we really enjoyed it.
I want to talk about your kids and grandkids as we go along. You talked about adoption. But I also want to find out what you've been doing professionally. You were in San Francisco working with Procter & Gamble. I know Procter & Gamble headquarters was in Cincinnati, right? So I'm guessing the two are linked together in some way.
Yeah, so they hired, P&G is very smart and a great company, but they hired, people like me who were in the military, who were working with, tanks and, training people and a lot of engineering. We graduated the Bachelor of Science degree of engineering, is what most of it. So that was a good place to start. But P&G, I really enjoyed San Francisco, and I really felt like this was a good place to be. But I was really being drawn to sales and marketing. This was manufacturing, and I liked that. But I was being exposed more and more to sales and marketing, which was headquartered in P&G in Cincinnati. Right. So P&G promoted me and moved me to Cincinnati into the marketing. But what was really unique about this, Greg, was that I learned a lot more than I contributed at P&G. It was kind of my transition from the military, and they just were so brilliant. But I had the chance to work on the Folger brand from a manufacturing point of view, from a sales point of view, and marketing, all three disciplines on the same brand. So it really gave me a great perspective of how you launch a brand and what's involved and how the disciplines interact. Does that make sense to you? So, that was their contribution to me. So we moved back to Cincinnati. Now, we also accepted that. We could have stayed in San Francisco, but, we wanted our grandkids, or at least grandkid at that point, to know their grandparents. So we felt like we needed to get back and enjoy, Joy's mom and my mom. So it was kind of a joint decision here where they offered it, and we took a while to think about it, but we said we had a wonderful time here. We hated to leave, but we thought it'd be nice to be around our family and grow up, and we did that. So it worked out really good. So we're 3 hours away from Lagodi, being in Cincinnati. So.
Yeah. So how long did you work with Procter & Gamble?
I was there 6 years.
6?
Yeah. And I got hired from P&G to a person who was a senior director at P&G, who went to work, who was the VP of Totes Incorporated, like Totes Umbrellas, Totes Representative. They were headquartered in Cincinnati, Loveland. So they hired me there. He hired me to be the marketing director. And I really loved that. So that was, a chance so I could get more involved in the marketing and the sales. So the pattern here started working very nicely. And then I was there several years. I really enjoyed it. And then I went to work for the Kohl's, frozen Kohl's garlic bread. You ever had Kohl's bread? It's out in Michigan. No. Okay. But I worked for them as a VP of marketing sales. But then I kind of always wanted to be out on my own. So what happened was I converted between being an employee as the VP of marketing sales at Kohl's to their consulting sales manager, because I had some other companies. So my business model for the last 30 years is I work for 5 or 6 companies. I'm a functioning VP of marketing sales, and I help them develop their products. I help them do the packaging. But most importantly, I go out and sell it to Walmart and to Walgreens and Kroger. So for the last 30 years, I've consulted for over 300 companies overall, and not everything works.
As your own company?
Yeah, John O'Malley and Associates. But I'm a national sales and marketing consultant. So I help. So what I saw there, think of all the thousands of companies that are under $10 million that need expertise of someone like, a senior 25-year experience, but they can't afford it. So I work with them on a consulting basis for, several of them. So, it works well for me financially, but it works well for them as well because I bring that kind of expertise. I've launched probably about 200 products successfully. I've had some colossal failures. I mean, I'm talking about colossal. And the reason I bring that up is that I probably learned more in the failures because, I didn't anticipate it. It's like we launched some. I had a product line from Taiwan, and the day we launched it, there was another quake in the plant, so they couldn't produce. We launched another product where, like Pedialyte, the children's Pedialyte. Well, we had a portable version. The company came out like a month after ours, so things happen. I had these are the failures. I had a gummy line way back when gummy started coming on the scene, and they wanted to go national. And I said, in my experience, we probably should walk before we run because you don't always know what's going to happen. Well, they said, no, we need to get full distribution. So I got in full distribution at Walgreens, but all the gummies melted in in the warehouses where it was hot because we didn't test it,
Yeah, that's not good.
So the point is, the one thing I try to bring to my clients is a lot of failures where I can say, we're not going to do that again. Here's something to be aware of, some problems. Yeah. But, I love that job. I traveled 4 million miles on Delta. Those are real miles, not promotional. All 4 million. It's all domestic. But I was traveling all over the country, going to headquarters, hundreds of trade shows, training sales agents. I really enjoyed it. Yeah. I really did, and it was a good experience. The one thing I will say that my wife would say at this point if she was here, we had a wonderful relationship, but I would get on her nerves at times, and sometimes she would say, John, shouldn't you be traveling someplace? You're kind of getting on my nerves. And she also said, we've been together 48, but you were gone for 24. I've been traveling. So what are you going to do?
Are you still consulting?
Yes, I still work full time. I really enjoy it. I mean,
still traveling?
No, that's the beauty to it. COVID stopped all the traveling. So now I do 20 Zoom calls a week, and I do the same thing. Even the trade shows are virtual, on Zoom. Right. So it works out really well for me because I really love that. Because the traveling would wear me down a lot more now, when I'm at my age and my speed. But I really enjoy what I'm doing. There's nothing more exciting than to take a small little product that's really unique and get full distribution and get it to move off the shelf, and then somebody will come in and buy it. I had a product line. My biggest success was a product line called Breath RX, and it was a super premium line of 9 products. And, at the time, Listerine for 16 ounces was like $3.99. We were $9.99, 3 times the cost. But the focus was, if someone is, in business or a social setting or absolutely concerned about making sure they had the freshest breath possible, they would be willing to pay a premium because we had a good product. So we put that into 55,000 stores, and Philip Sonic bought it. So it was really good experience. I really enjoyed that.
Let's talk family. So, you have John in Fort Riley. You talked about adoption. Was that something that, because of your situation, you wanted to do?
Yeah, that's a really good. There was a beautiful story there that I'll tell you. Again, Joy's at the center of it. Joy had several miscarriages and 2 ectopics. So she, at one point, after we had our second child, Ashley, biologically, she was no longer able to have children. And so the doctor said after that, the second ectopic, he said, Joy, you're never going to have any more children. And she said, oh, yeah, we will. So she said, we're going to adopt. So a year later, we adopted a boy from Cincinnati, Nicholas, and he was 2 years old. And, that was a wonderful experience. And, he's prospered. He went to the Navy. He got his degree. I have 4 kids that have college degrees, so we're really proud of all of them. But he got his degree, went to the Navy. He's a single parent now. But he lives, all of our family live right around us. So it's such a blessing. So we adopted Nick as our first adopted child. Then 2 years later, we adopted Annie, who's Korean. And that was, just an amazing story. She had ventricular septum defect, a great big hole in her heart. So she was considered a handicap. So we had to get her. They didn't think she would live past 12 because the heart was so bad. But we took a risk. And we adopted her because we just felt that's what we were supposed to do.
At what age was she?
2 years old.
2.
she got here, didn't speak a word of English, and make a long story short, you know, we didn't have coverage. I guess I forget the terminology, but she needed open heart surgery, but our insurance wouldn't cover it. So Joy went to the head of the pediatric department at the University of Cincinnati and convinced them her heart was so complicated it would be a great case study. So they did the surgery free for Annie.
Oh my.
And now she's 30 something years old.
Yeah.
She's a Delta flight attendant. She's been in 48 countries. And she's the joy of our life because she's just a independent, beautiful woman. And she's been such a pleasure. But it was a wonderful thing because when we started looking at expanding to our second adopted, I had said, it would be great if we could just investigate the possibility of adopting a Korean child because I had such a good experience with it. So again, it all kind of came together, as far as bringing her on board. So we have 4 grown children. Annie travels a lot, but she's home a lot all the time. But they're all right around us, and they're just wonderful, just blessings. My son John would have been a soccer star, probably a soccer scholarship, but at 16 he had a career-ending accident in soccer where he crushed his ankle and he couldn't play. But he really had the talent, and he would have gone away. But he's really done a great job. He's got his own brokerage company now, but he coaches soccer for inner city kids, and he coaches soccer for his son. He's got 2 sons that do well, and he was great. One of the things Joy wanted me to mention was that he played on a select team, they call it them, or Olympic development team, for 5 years. They won over 200 games, about 25 tournaments. We went to all 50 states, traveled with him, put 200,000 miles on our van because he was so talented. At that age.
You wouldn't trade it for the world, would you?
It was a fabulous experience, and he was.
Well, we don't want to slight anybody because we've got John, Nick, and Annie. You said you had 4.
Yeah. Ashley was our second biological child, and she is a registered nurse. She went to Xavier, and she has 2 beautiful children. And she just moved out about 5 minutes from our house, so she's been. We keep drawing them all closer here because it's just.
So Joy was a nurse, you said, for 45 years. So that had a role in.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
that's fantastic.
Joy's the center of our family. Everything kind of revolves around her. She's the focal point of. They all talk to her every day several times. I mean, I'm involved, but she's the center and the rock. You know what I'm saying? I mean, absolutely. She just keeps everybody connected.
So 4 kids. How many grandkids?
5 grandkids.
5 grandkids.
Yeah, and I had some older friends who knew how much we loved our children, but they had grandchildren before I did. They said, "John, I know you love your children. Wait till you get grandchildren." And I thought, it can't be that much greater. Well, I'm gonna tell you something. It's really been great. My John, our first son, he has 2 boys now. They're 15 and 12. They're both super soccer stars. But I taught both of them to play chess and ping pong. Well, the sad news is they both are beginning to beat me at both of those now.
Yeah, well, a 9-year-old can beat you. I mean,
no. That's a good point, I guess. No. And I'm really trying, but they're just, it's such a great experience because we're very connected, and they're really great kids.
And they're all in your area.
Oh, they're all within a 10-mile radius.
I'm so fortunate.
That's a blessing.
It is.
Because we're just, we're with them, several times a week. We travel, we take with them, go to soccer games. Yeah. It's just, that's what I'm saying. Family is the best thing going, and Joy is the center of that. Yeah. And all my grandkids are great. Ashley's 2 children, she has a 12-year-old boy who's plays soccer, is really into computers. His name is Hunter, and he's a wonderful young man. And I also have Nick has a single parent. He's got a 14-year-old, 15-year-old daughter, I think now. She's not around as much because she spends time with her mother who lives in North Carolina. So unfortunately, we wish we had more time with her. We're very close, but we just don't see her as much. Yeah. But I got to take a second to talk about my granddaughter. My youngest 5-year-old granddaughter, whose name is Chloe. She kind of controls everything.
5-year-olds tend to do that.
Yeah, she's amazing. She's in ballet. She's in soccer. She's in gymnastics. She I mean, she Google duels me all the time, all day long, just back and forth. What are you doing? Let's play hide and seek's our favorite game. I mean, she just keeps us.
What was the term?
Google duels like FaceTime, where you do the phone, where you have the video. She calls me all the time just to get
Google do. Okay.
Yeah, it's called Google Duo, which is
Duo. Okay.
Video
Gotcha.
phone.
Okay.
But she just grabs her mom's phone and says, "What are you doing, Papa?" I mean,
5 years old.
Yeah.
I know it. I tell people all the time. You think you know.
Yeah.
Wait till you had that grandchild.
Such a blessing. You know, the other thing I love about the grandkids, I was probably a little too strict with my kids. I was kind of demanding, and that's my fault. I meant well, but I put probably more pressure on than I really should have.
Yeah.
I want my grandkids to just have fun. I don't care what they do.
Enjoy life.
They all try really hard, but it's like I just enjoy being around them.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, big difference. My oldest son said, I love the relationship you have with my boys. I kind of wish we'd have had such a great, it was a good relationship, but it's just so special because the grandkids just really enjoy being around Joy and me because, we just let them be themselves completely.
It's different. That's for sure.
It really is.
All right. So you're a deacon in the Catholic Church. You started in part one talking about how important God has been in your life.
Yeah.
And you're going to end your life someday, and God's going to be right there with you. And you've taken on this journey. How did that come into be?
Well, I think I told you, early on, I partly because my mom and my dad, raised me as a Catholic and gave me a strong faith. I thought I was being called to be a priest. I mentioned to you, but Joy changed all that. But I was always felt along the way that I wanted to do more. I was, the parishes we're at, I was a lector and, parish council, made president. So I was involved at different parishes. I was in the choir, different places. So I tried to remain active, but I always felt there was more. So probably in my 40s, someone said out of the blue, have you ever thought about being a deacon? And I didn't really know what a deacon was. Deacons kind of went away for a while, but they came back here the last 25 years. So I had been thinking about it for a long time, and finally at some point, because I was kind of waiting for everything to, free up time, but there's never enough time. You're working full time, you got a family. But the fact that all the kids are out of the house, made it a little simpler as far as just the time demand, even though I was working full time. So about 7 years ago, I guess now, I got really serious about becoming a deacon, applied, and it's a 5-year process. You have 3 years of training and education and some classes and some online things. Then for the last 2 years, you have a very intense, every other weekend program where, you train, and there's a very specific process. So I went through the process. I really enjoyed it, and I was ordained here in April of 2019 as a deacon, and I really enjoyed that. I think the church needs more people to step up here because there are a lot of challenges out there. I mean, I don't want to get too involved in the discussion, but the devil's very active, and a lot of people, I think, are looking for some encouragement. And I think, as a deacon, you have the opportunity to preach, the opportunity to, get involved in marriage preparation. And, I think you can have a positive impact there on a faith basis. You know what I'm saying? It's not that I have all the answers, but I feel like a lot of people are looking for some guidance, some kind of input on, and that's the opportunity. I do a lot of writing for the Bulletin and, some different articles. There's a magazine called The Deacon, which is a national publication for all the deacons. I'm a fairly regular contributor to that, just talking about different things.
Okay.
So I enjoy that a lot.
Okay. We talked about a lot. Couldn't talk about everything. But is there anything that I didn't ask you about that you want to talk about? Kind of an open forum for the next few minutes, John.
Can I take just a second here?
Sure.
I think we covered all the basics here. I just, like I said, in retrospect, basketball got a hold of me, and it was a wonderful experience all the way through. There are a lot of the things I really enjoyed, but I just feel so blessed. That's kind of been the theme of my life here in terms of, a great family, joy coming into my life, the children all around. Family is just so important. So I feel really fortunate in that regard. So,
well, I'll tell you what, I feel fortunate too. I just met John O'Malley today. maybe somewhere along the line we've met in some informal fashion, but certainly a pleasure. Maybe one of my first boyhood idols, like Junior G was yours. And so enjoy getting to talk to you. And I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, John.
I enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
John O'Malley. Finally get to do it. I've been looking to do this for about a year. Happens to be over at St. Meinrad, so we take the opportunity, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. 2 parts, because there was so much to talk about with John O'Malley. Thank you for watching this edition of Getting to Know Your Indiana Neighbor with John O'Malley.
Yesterday at school, we went to chapel. Yeah, chapel. And we learned 7 days. So this is how many days God created us. 6 days. And then on the 7th day, he rested. Bye, love you, Papa. And after you see this message, call me.
So have fun at your retreat.
Have fun at your retreat.